Hello all and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harrison. Each week I'm joined by hunky, hairy, huggable homos and their friends who love film and like to dish a little bit of fun movie talk to... God, I say this all the time. You'd think I'd have this spiel down pat by now, but you know what? It's okay, because when you say the same thing every week, you sound boring, and who wants to listen to a boring podcast? I don't. So here's my team not boring hashtag. Anyway, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Jim Poliafco is here with us. Welcome, Jim.
Hi, and welcome to the podcast, everyone.
And Will Lindis is here with us as well. Hello, Will.
Hey, Brad, thanks for the intro. Movie fans, thanks for tuning in.
Indeed. We are also very delighted to welcome two special guests to the show this week. They have graced the... Is it airwaves, technically speaking? Would it be airwaves for the show? Or digital download waves?
Digital airwaves?
Darewaves? I don't even know at this point. Whatever. But Felipe Garcia from the Real Comics Podcast is with us. Welcome, Felipe.
What's up, moviegoers and true believers? Thanks for having me on, guys.
Glad to have you here. Absolutely, absolutely. And we also have writer Chris Cummins here with us as well. You may have read some of his work on Den of Geek or Up Rocks. Welcome, Chris. Glad to have you here.
Thanks, guys, for having me back. I really appreciate it. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Always a pleasure, indeed. Well, big show this week. If you couldn't tell from my hat, it might have been a little bit of a tip-off. We are going to be discussing Captain America Civil War. So who the fuck cares about movie news on a week when there's a Marvel movie out? I don't. So we're skipping that, and we're going to dive right into our review. But before we do, just a bit of our spoiler plate warning, if you will. We're going to talk about the movie, gosh, with five of us, probably for about half an hour. Totally spoiler-free before we get into our spoiler section. Felipe, you got to bring those up on screen again because they're adorable.
I love them. I got the old school Captain America there. Rocking
nice.
With the wings.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
For those of you who are not watching on YouTube right now, you totally missed the cutest Captain America and Iron Man fighting bobbleheads in existence. I feel bad that you're not experiencing the joy of video with us. That sounds weird. Anyway, moving on. So we will, of course, take some time to let you know if we think this movie is worth seeing. Honestly, you've probably made your mind up already and seen the movie or not. But you know what? Hey, That's okay. So here we go. Our discussion of Captain America Civil War. So, Jim, why don't you give us kind of the basic setup for this film, and if you think it's worth checking out. What do you think?
I'll definitely try to do that. I am probably the least knowledgeable of the panel here about the movies and about the movie, but we'll see how it goes. So, we've got Captain America Civil War. This is set 1 year after the events of Age of Ultron. We just saw Age of Ultron last summer, I think, right? Yeah, 1 year has passed in real time, and the movie is also 1 year has passed in movie time. So now there's a disagreement over international oversight of the Avengers because of what happened in Age of Ultron, some of the events in Age of Ultron. And this international oversight and the idea of it has kind of fractured former allies within the Avengers into opposing factions, one led by Steve Rogers as Captain America, and the other led by Tony Stark, who we know as Iron Man. So this is this is Captain America's movie, right? It's got Captain America in the title. It's the third Captain America movie, even though we'll talk about it, but this is really this is really an Avengers movie. It's the 13th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I learned today, and it's directed by the same guys who directed Winter Soldier, Captain America Winter Soldier, the brothers Russo, right? Anthony and Joe Russo. So they're kind of on a roll with these Captain America Marvel movies. This cast has so many people in it. You've got, of course, I mentioned, Captain America. We got Chris Evans. We got Robert Downey Jr., Scarlett Johansson, Anthony Mackie, Don Cheadle, Jeremy Renner. Got newcomers, Chadwick Boseman in here, Paul Bettany, Elizabeth Olsen, Paul Rudd from the Ant-Man movie we have in here. God, it's just, we got another newcomer, Tom Holland, coming into the thing, and we'll talk about that a little bit. William Hurt and Daniel Bruhl, who is also a newcomer into the movie. Yeah, we saw this movie over the weekend. Squeezed it in at the end of our camping trip on Sunday. And, I got to admit that of all the Marvel movies, and I'm going to set a movie like Guardians of the Galaxy aside, because I really love that movie for its disconnectedness from the Marvel Universe. But in terms of all the superhero movies in this Marvel Universe, kind of these more well-known superhero properties, I got to say that I've always been partial to the Captain America story. I loved both of the first two movies, actually. For me, they're better than Iron Man. They're better than the Thor movies. And I know everybody has their favorite. I don't know why Captain America kind of resonates with me so much. Maybe it's because he's like the less, I don't know how to say it, the less like, he's a more straightforward kind of superhero. Not much in the way of, being a jerk to people, or, he's definitely not a motor mouth. He's a straight shooter, and I kind of like that. I really like this movie again. I mean, this is 3 in a row of the Captain America movies I really liked. This movie had a lot going for it. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces in here. I was worried when I heard they were going to add a lot of other characters in this movie. Introduce some new ones even. This movie introduces some new characters. Let's just say that. I won't get too far into spoilery town, even though I think some of it's in the trailer, so we might be able to mention it here. But so it had to do that, and it had to talk about this rift between the Avengers, and specifically between Captain America and Iron Man. I really, really like this movie a lot for a superhero movie, and that's saying a whole bunch for me. So I like the way they put the story together. It's got a couple of minor tweaks that I can talk about, maybe in spoilers. But with so many moving parts, something like that's kind of bound to happen in editing. You might lose some continuity or whatever. And we'll talk about that a little bit. And maybe there's a comic book storyline that I'm not getting that kind of fills in the gaps for what I thought was kind of a jump in the movie. But yeah, I really liked it. And by the way, I did pick the right side going into the movie, the correct side. Did you guys? Let's go down the line. Did you guys have to pick a side going into the movie? Like, did somebody say, "Hey, which side are you on?" Brad?
I'm always on the side of what is right, good, truthful, and awesome. So it was an easy choice for me. No one made me choose, but
yeah. So which side were you on?
Fucking duh, Captain America. Look at my hat. Are you kidding?
Well, some people might say that was the other side too. I mean, whatever. How about Will?
That's what I love so much about this particular decision, is that I don't think there is a very clear cut like which one is right. Both sides present extremely good arguments. So I think going into it, based on the arguments that were presented, I was probably Team Tony for good portions of it. You can't help but be Team Cap for a Captain America movie, though. So call me Team Both. I love this. I love this
awesome
choice.
Yeah. All right, Felipe, you're up.
Going in, definitely having some knowledge of the comics, knowing that this movie wasn't going to be anything like them.
Right.
I was already Team Cap. I might be wearing the Iron Man gear and stuff like that. That's just to be different. But Team Cap for sure. It's also been one of my favorite sets of movies in the Marvel cinema. Yeah. So Team Cap.
Yeah. And you, Chris?
Yeah, I would. I think I definitely agree with what Will said. Is that at times throughout the movie they're both right. I'm
talking about like before the movie started. Like where did your allegiances lie?
I would say Team Cap. Definitely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So we're mostly Team Cap here, with Will being kind of more partial maybe to Team Tony at the start. Yeah, I did. Felipe, you mentioned it. I did hear, and I don't know, again, I don't read the comics, but I heard that this movie does deviate quite a bit from the actual Civil War comic. So I don't know any of that, but I do like how they presented the story. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about some of the similarities or differences maybe between some other recent comic book superhero movies. But yeah, I loved it. I would definitely recommend it. Go out and see it. I'm sure almost everybody's seen it by now. This movie's on a tremendous roll as far as box office goes. We may even see it another time. I don't know, but yeah, it's a recommend for me.
Awesome. Very good. All right, Felipe, what about you, my friend?
Cool. All right. Been excited to talk about this quite a bit, and still looking forward to talking about it on my own podcast. I was able to see this actually early on in the theaters. I was fortunate enough to win a pair of passes and see it Tuesday prior to week's opening, simply from a comic book shop here in town. So I got some footage of some great people in line. No trailers, just a long Audi commercial and their relationship to the movie. But the movie was outstanding, on par with what I was expecting, or what I would call Avengers 2.5. But the Captain America series, as you said kind of a little bit, Jim, has always been my favorite. In my own podcast, I listed this movie as one of the top movies of the summer that I was expecting to see. Of all the movies coming out this year, this one was the one I was most excited about, because I felt it would be the bookend, but also the lead-in to other things, and it really did deliver on all levels. From the beginning to the middle to the end, it was a little shaky. We'll talk about that in spoilers. I have a couple of questions and variations of how they veered off a little bit, I think. But all in all, the movie was great. I've seen it twice. I will probably see it just one more time. But, yeah, definitely a recommend and definitely a thumbs up. It's purely entertaining. You don't have to know the Marvel Civil War comic book series. They did a good job of getting around that, or what they call, I've even learned, too, that they call that, it's not even a series, it's called an event. So, yeah, totally different. I know we'll get into it, but definitely thumbs high, and I'll see it one more time.
Nice, nice. Well, for me, just kind of going down the line, I would have to say it always takes a Captain America movie to kind of like bring me back to the Marvel Universe and sort of like get me excited about things again. I don't know what it is about the Captain America movies specifically. Maybe it's because I'm a huge Superman fan, and I see Captain America kind of a lot like the Superman on the Marvel side of things, just in terms of like truth, justice, not necessarily the American way part. Burn me in flames now, whatever, I don't care. But more about just sort of morally doing like what's right and what's best for people, and sort of like championing people. And I really, really like the conflict that this movie sets up. We've seen it in the trailers. To some degree, we'll go into it more in spoilers. But obviously there's this division that's created, and there isn't necessarily a clear-cut answer at first. But as things in the movie sort of unfold, you start to realize that, maybe it's not as cut and dry as you would think at first. I don't know. But as usual, really love the performance of Chris Evans as Captain America. He continues to just be so earnest and so forthright and so freaking cute. I want to scream. So there's that too. But I think he did a great job. And it's interesting that we're kind of bandying about the term of this being an Avengers movie or Avengers 2.5. It really picks up on some of the plot threads that were left hanging from Avengers 2, Age of Ultron, which I like. I don't always like it when movies pick up like a year and a half after these movies and things happen like off-screenville, and you just sort of have to pick it up and run with it. I think we were given some seeds of things that are still to come. But I like that we sort of ran with some of those storylines as well. So if you really liked Age of Ultron and you had some questions at the end, like, oh my God, what the fuck's going to happen now? I think Civil War is definitely a phenomenal film to kind of tie into that. Man, so much like awesome cast power in this film. Scarlett Johansson. Oh my God, I totally want to see like a Black Widow movie. I hear maybe there's a possibility. I don't know. I hope that's more than just internet rumor. I would watch the shit out of a Black Widow movie. I totally would. Elizabeth Olsen, who, you know, she was pretty forgettable in Godzilla, the new Godzilla film, but I do like her as the Scarlet Witch. The funky little thing she like does with her hands is a little like hocus pocus Bette Midler for me, but I mean it works. You know, it works.
Don't forget that accent.
I right, her Sokovian accent. Blah, that's the spell. Blah. Anyway, so I really loved Chadwick Boseman in this film. Probably for me, he's one of my absolute favorite parts of this movie. I cannot freaking wait to see this guy in his own movie. I am so excited. So I could talk for like an hour, I'm sure, just with my initial thoughts, but I'm going to save it. We're going to move down the line. Chris, what do you think?
I mean, I loved it. I was I think like the Winter Soldier was, before I saw this, the best of the Marvel films to date. I think Guardians was like my favorite, but this I thought Winter Soldier was like the best done of the films, and I was wondering how the Russo brothers would really kind of top themselves with this. But I think the sheer volume of characters that they had to juggle, all the kind of intense plot stuff that was happening, they gave everyone an arc, a story arc, be it small character or large character. You know, they did the kind of perfunctory setting up for future Marvel movies a little bit, but none of that kind of took away from the main cast and the main action drive of the film. So I really think like that the Russo brothers in a Captain America film are kind of the ultimate combination in terms of like the superhero blockbusters right now. I loved it.
Awesome. And Will, close us out.
Kind of like Chris, coming into this, Winter Soldier was my favorite Marvel movie. I think it was the one that most strongly delivered on its promise. And this is coming from someone who I've enjoyed, by and large, the bulk of these Marvel movies. I think that Marvel does a really good job of understanding its characters, at least on the big screen, and putting out films that are both superhero films and spy thrillers or fantasy epics or sci-fi space operas or whatever the subgenre happens to be. This here is a film that I absolutely love. I love Civil War. Put me right there on the bandwagon with everyone else. This is a film that fits very closely to where I think Captain America works best cinematically, which is kind of in that neo-spy thriller type storyline, which is what we saw in Winter Soldier. We see a lot of that here. This is at its core a Captain America movie. This is a film that is all about Captain America's journey. What's cool about it is it's now we're 13 films deep. This film does not ignore the fact that Captain America lives in this world surrounded by all of these other characters, in this giant tower surrounded by all these other guys who wear spandex. So he gets to do this like spy stuff while also figuring out how the other people around him are impacted by the stuff that's going on. The Russo brothers were a great choice to take over Whedon's mantle as the runner for the films. I think that every character. This is a film that is absolutely bloated with characters, and we've seen other films that have run into this problem and not worked as well because it didn't know how to fit all of those people in. I was worried about it too. In some ways, it's kind of okay because you've got 13 films worth of build-up, of foundation to let these characters breathe, so you don't have to do a lot of explanation. But once I heard they were introducing a certain character because they got certain rights back, I was worried how that was going to work out. I liked the final product. I like what we saw. Every one of the 12 main heroes that is in this film has something to do. Even if it's something small, they've got an arc. They've got development that we'll either see in the next film in an organic way or within this own film or something. I absolutely loved this movie forward and backwards. There's one small plot point that I didn't care for and one joke that I thought was really awkwardly placed. We'll get to those. Those don't deflate at all from the movie itself. I mean, it's an absolute must-watch for me, especially for what a huge feat this is. You are pitting two major characters against one another and forcing us as the audience to, like, pick sides, just like we did at the beginning of this podcast, just like everyone's doing on social media or walking into the theater. And the wonder of this film is that you can go through this entire film and understand the justifications for both sides. And honestly, sitting here having watched the film, being on the other side of it, I could still see myself being swayed back and forth on either argument, even seeing how everything unfolds. That's clever writing. That's brilliant writing to me. This is a must-watch for me.
So it sounds like we're all pretty much universally of the same mind when it comes to should you watch it, should you check it out. Maybe we loved it for similar reasons, maybe a little bit different, but by and large, this seems like a very positive recommend. Anything else?
Yeah, this one hinges a lot on the civil Captain America Winter Soldier. Yeah. I don't know if this one would. I don't know if I went into this without seeing the first two Captain America movies, if I would really get some of the stuff, especially between, Captain America and the Bucky character. You know what I mean? I don't know if all that, they didn't retread it. They didn't have to, because I think most of us knew it going in. But if you didn't know it and you jumped into this movie, I think that might be a little bit, might have been a little weird. I don't know. But I got the sense in watching it that you kind of almost had to know that story going in.
I feel like you're probably pretty right in that. Like, I don't think you can maybe easily just walk into this one having not seen any of the others. But I think that there's probably only, to me, I think there's only two films that I would say are probably must-watches to understand the storyline here, and that's Winter Soldier because of the Bucky stuff, and Age of Ultron because some of the stuff that happens in this film is dependent on the climax of that film. But you don't need to have watched Ant-Man. You don't need to have watched all the Iron Man movies. I think they help build the stakes and help us understand why we like these characters, but I think you don't necessarily have to have gone through all 13 to enjoy this. Go ahead, Brad. I know you were getting ready to say something, too.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's one of those things where, unlike some of the other Marvel movies that I've taken issues with, I think that this character has gotten the best treatment overall in terms of his throughput through his own movies. One of my complaints about the Thor movies is just like, okay, Thor 2, here we go. Thor's being Thor, but we're not really getting a lot of, deep examination of his character. We're not seeing him in these situations where, like, oh my god, crazy Thor, moral quandary, what's Thor gonna do now? Whereas I feel like with these Captain America movies, especially Winter Soldier, right, we have this whole setup of, he's trying to protect everybody from this Winter Soldier. Oh wait, the Winter Soldier is actually his friend from 50 years ago, also, brought forward in time through clever freezing or whatever. You know what I mean? So I love that this film sort of picks up on those elements, continues running through, but not only uses them to tell a story, but also uses those elements to suddenly pit Captain America against these people who are like his ride-or-died family, his friends, you know what I mean? His people, his group of people since coming out of the ice is pretty small. They're his whole world, pretty much. We'll talk about one of those people maybe not being an influence, when we get to spoilers, but it's one of those things where I just feel like when I look at all of the different Marvel characters, and I love the Iron Man movies. I like the Iron Man, I like his story, I like the arc, but I feel like we've gotten more mileage out of 3 Captain America movies in terms of this one specific character than we did out of, say, the Iron Man movie. So that's just my thought.
I think that's a lot of depth, Brad. That's a lot of depth that they put into that character, and it's the reason it's my favorite. I mean, the government issue started way back with S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Winter Soldier. When S.H.I.E.L.D. fell, there was already an issue. One of my favorite lines, not to necessarily go backwards here completely, is when Captain America is confronting Nick Fury, and he's telling him, and he's showing him all the new airships, and he's like, "This isn't freedom." It's that seed started right in there, and it continues on in this movie, and I think that's why, for me at least, that I love it so much. It's picked up from there now, like as you said in the description, it's fractured, and it literally has the most depth of, I think, of most of the Marvel movies.
Yeah, I think with these Captain America movies, there's the stakes are never higher than they are in these films. I would say the stakes in Civil War is even higher than almost the original Avengers. Because you have such a fantastical thing happening at the end of that with Loki controlling the alien army. But here, it's really basically comes down to this team kind of being forced to splinter because of the Accords in the film. So I think it's really interesting and smart that Marvel does kind of layer in the depth in these Captain America films. This is a much more strongly written film than I think Age of Ultron was, and I think definitely although obviously the events of Age of Ultron affect this movie greatly, I think it's just fascinating to think about what's going to happen from here, given what happens in this film.
Yeah, and it's all character-based, too. I mean, Captain America, when you look at who each of these characters are, this is a character who, Brad, you mentioned this before, this is a character who is about choosing the right decision in all situations, whether it's, even if it's not the easy thing, or even if it's not the most lawful, air quotes, thing, he goes for what is the morally right thing to do, and that's been his through line. That's the thing that he has to wrestle with, and I think they've done a really good job across these three movies, all three of these, building that arc. Who is Captain America? What makes him tick? Why does he keep standing up when he gets knocked down? And why do we cheer so much when he does so? We look at him as this sentinel. This, you mentioned like Superman. He is very much a Superman type character, just without the same power set. He is kind of the representation of kind of who we wish he could be. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, we don't see a lot of this same development across the other Marvel characters, and part of it's because they're not the same Marvel characters. I think that Tony Stark has his own growth and development, and I think to his credit, I think what we saw across the Iron Man movies, his story arc, which I think where he learned about his personal responsibility and even the ability for him to kind of step away and let go, I think plays a direct role in what happens here. Thor, as you mentioned, well, Thor 2 is a hard one to talk about because Thor 2 had some problems. Thor 2 had some big problems, but he's not in this one, so fortunately we don't have to deal with his character arc as it plays out here. Yeah.
Spoiler: there's no Thor in this movie.
Yeah, everyone's seen the trailer that has the characters running at them, and you didn't see Thor there, so I feel okay spoiling that Thor's not in this one.
That is a Thorable spoiler, Jim.
Whoa.
I was just thinking about how it's amazing how many of these characters are born. These superhero characters are born out of daddy issues. Like, all of them have dead dads. Like, it's crazy.
And mom's named Martha.
Huh? And mom's named Martha. Right.
Those are
the wait, your mom's name is Martha too?
Why did you say her name?
I was saying her name last night.
Oh! Wow. Civil War. Hashtag Grad. Hashtag Will.
Wow. I felt an Obama mic drop right there.
But hey, yeah. it was Mother's Day. Someone's got to treat her.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I know.
Damn, Brad's sassy today.
Brad is on fire.
Oh goodness. Well, guys, are we ready to get to some spoilers? What do we think?
I think so. There's a lot to talk about, and we don't want to spoil anybody.
Yeah,
we've got a lot to unpack here. So, all right. Well, here we go. We are officially going to launch into spoiler territory. So if you've not seen the film yet, if you value your virginal innocence, now is your time to step away, come back in probably 30 or 40 minutes, catch our plugs on the flip side. But let's kick things off. So I want to kick things off a little bit with a discussion of a certain character who shows up. Oh, wait, spoilers are fair game. I want to talk about Spider-Man. So obviously we saw him in the newer trailers, right? He does his like superhero landing. I really wish Deadpool would have been there to like comment on it. He's got the shield. You know, we saw that in the trailer. But how do you guys feel about this version of Spider-Man? Do you think that he fit here? Did he feel like an afterthought add-on? What do you think?
I will say that I did really like this characterization of Spider-Man. I don't want to get into, I hated this one, I love this one, because I've seen them all, but this one seems to for some reason resonate a little bit more for me. What I didn't like was the way they introduced this character in the movie. I thought it was super clunky, and like bam, Tony Stark just says, "Oh yeah, I know this guy," and boom, next thing you know, we're with Marissa Tomei and him are having coffee like they knew each other forever. Nothing is explained really with regard to their connection. Now, again, maybe this is a piece where something is filled in that I don't know about, and that could very well be. But it seemed super, almost like punched in. But once we got introduced to the character, once I got over that, like, what the hell? How does he know this guy? What the hell? Once I got past that, I really liked the character, and I liked the way the character was used from that point on quite a bit. I just don't think the introduction of that character was done anywhere near as well as it was for Black Panther. Black Panther seemed to be his introduction seemed to be much more kind of organic to the story, I guess. At least we understood kind of where he came from and all that stuff. But yeah, I do like the Spider-Man here.
Yeah.
But I'll let you guys talk about your impressions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad they've got Spider-Man back under their control. I'm one of those people who absolutely hated the last two Spider-Man movies. I thought they were garbage fires, and so I'm very happy that Marvel has control of that character again. I think the dude that they got, Tom Holland, is a really good young Peter Parker, really good Spider-Man. He was a lot of fun. In terms of the introduction, I think that comes from Tony had said he was kind of keeping tabs on just like different people operating in the city, so he had found this like footage of Spider-Man and tracked it back. So his first time meeting Aunt May and meeting Peter Parker was in that scene where he walks in. So he didn't know them before. He just walked in and was like, "Hey, I'm gonna like schmooze you and charm you and make you think that Peter's got this other offer that's not." And that's the power of Tony Stark. He knows how to charm a woman. But man, once we got to see him actually operating in the fights, we got to see how his humor worked. We also got to see how green he was, all things considered. Like, he didn't know how to handle himself in all the fights compared to the other characters. I think you could definitely tell their experience level was different. But you could also tell why this kid will be a charming and compelling character to lead his own film. I was all aboard this Spider-Man.
This was an amazing addition to the Avengers, and I'm glad that they got them back / Captain America winner, whatever. But yeah. his character, from what little I know from the books, and a lot of it comes from my partner in crime on my podcast. The Spider-Man character is much younger, so this kid is perfect. And in the comic book series, since we're into spoilers, Tony takes his time and he kind of worms his way and twists Peter Parker in such a way to convince him that what they're doing is the right thing. Now, obviously, we got a 2-hour movie window, and they're just going to go chunk. So I get what you're saying, Jim, but totally, completely. It doesn't surprise me, I guess. I mean, it's with the comic background. It doesn't surprise me that Tony would be paying attention. It doesn't surprise me that he would have video footage that he could just throw up on a wall and say, This is you catching a car.
Did he know it was him? Like, how did he know it was him?
I'm sure he tracked him down one way or another, but
it's all
true to the movie. It didn't show it, but had we been given another hour, obviously true that we know going in that we're not going to get necessarily another Uncle Ben story in the new movie.
Oh, we don't want that. No.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. We're already past it. We're already there, and I thought that it was great making fun of his outfit. You know what I mean? The interaction was awesome. The kid is great. I don't think I've ever been looking forward more to a Spider-Man movie than I am right now. I'd be interested to see what Chris has to say. Chris.
Yeah, I'm gonna be difficult here, not about Tom Holland and Spider-Man, but I'm gonna be difficult and say that I have never enjoyed any of the Spider-Man films because I don't feel that they've ever gotten the character right until now. Spider-Man is not, the Raimi films focused on the brooding aspects of the character, which are there, but they're not his defining personality trait. His defining personality trait is his wisecracking and his heroism. And right off the bat here, you get a sense of that with the way Tom Holland portrays the character. He captures the awkwardness of Peter Parker, and he captures the wisecracking fun of Spider-Man. And everything else aside, just the way the costume looks is like ripped straight out of the pages of like the Marvels book or something like that. It looks like an Alex Ross painting come to life, and it is just a beautiful thing to behold. Spider-Man is my all-time favorite comic book character. So like to have him come alive in such a vibrant way on screen, to me, I kind of got lost in the movie after that because all I could focus on was how great his sequence was.
Did you get emotional, Chris? Did you get emotional?
A little bit.
When they finally got it right. No, that's totally cool.
A little bit.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I really just like the movie itself was just amazing, but the addition of him into it blew my mind. I can't wait for like the fact that next summer we get like a whole film with him. I can't wait. It's going to be great.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's so funny that you kind of mentioned like how, the movie was great, but you're having trouble enjoying it afterward because your brain is sort of still Spider-Man. Like at one point, Iron Man like pushes him on the ground or helps him up or whatever, and he's like, "You're done, kid. Go home."
Yeah.
And I'm like, No, this can't be all we get, please. And I'm like waiting for him.
Baby steps.
Well, I'm like waiting for him to show up like at a pivotal moment later in the movie. I'm like, this can't be it. This can't be it. But too much of a good thing, I guess, right? So yeah, I absolutely love this version of Spider-Man as well. I got to be honest, going into this film, everyone was losing their shit over the Spider-Man stuff in the trailer, and really for me, I'm like, good God, really another Spider-Man? Like, I'm glad Marvel has the rights, but like, I don't know that I'm ready to go through this all over again. So I was really glad we didn't get a single Uncle Ben reference. That was awesome. I would have been okay with it.
They almost went there, but I love the fact that I think he was starting to almost go there, and then they stopped it, and I thought that was excellent. I thought that was great the way they did that.
Yeah, because I think it's sort of a metaphor for what they're going to be doing, hopefully, with this new line of Spider-Man films, right? Maybe take us to the cusp of what we've seen before, but actually take it further and, I don't know, give us something great. So I loved seeing Spider-Man in the film. I think he was tremendous. I'm really jazzed to see the direction that they end up taking this Peter Parker. And that airport scene in general was really fantastic. We have a live...
Yes.
We have a live comment from one of our listeners, Ryan Rivera, who says, "Hey guys, just saw the film for the first time 3 hours ago." He says that airport scene blew my freaking mind with like 25 exclamation points. Like there's 3 rows of them. So that's the scene where Spidey showed up. So maybe that's a logical place to kind of start to unpack this. Did you guys, first of all, buy the character on character fight? I mean, did that work for you? Was that plausible?
It was fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it was all for fun. I mean, obviously there were even some jokes in between the characters, like, "Hey, you still like me, right? Even though we're fighting, whatever." And to me, again, there's no stakes there anyway in that fight. I mean, there's 2 opposite ideologies going at it, and they're not going to resolve it in a fight, obviously. And they're not gonna. No one's gonna get killed, obviously. So it's just for fun, and it worked. It was a lot of whiz bang, a lot of cool moments, and that's what you got to take away from it.
Yeah, I mean, these are characters who, I mean, aside from the 2 that first appeared in this movie, Black Panther and Spider-Man, these are all characters that we've seen fight in at least one film before. So this is almost like that thing that happens. I mean, anyone that's read comic books as like a 10-year-old boy knows this. You end up with those discussions of like, okay, who wins in a fight? Captain America versus Hawkeye. Okay, well, but does Hawkeye have this, and like you start to go through all these things. And what I love so much is we got to see a lot of different pairings. No one got taken out of the fight super quickly. Everyone got to have their moment to shine. Everyone got their moment to get kind of banged around. At the same time, this was all happening while Cap was getting to while Cap was still able to push his way through the storyline of that fight, like getting where he needs to with the people that he needs to get to so that he can do the thing he needs to do. And that's what I loved about that fight. I felt like at any given time I had a good idea of who was where. Sometimes like the location of a fight is really hard. Like you see these fights sometimes where it just feels like, oh wait, so-and-so, I thought they were unconscious, or I thought they were behind the building, and like you just don't know where people are. I always felt like when people were pairing off, I kind of had a good sense of location, where people were at any given time. With 12 people flying and zapping about, kudos to the choreographers and to the fight blocking on this.
That was an amazing. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that was an amazing scene. I mean, there are some stuff taken right out of the comics. One of my favorite shots is of Ant-Man getting ready to jump off of the arrow tips of Hawkeye. That's right off of a comic.
Yep.
That was amazing. My eyes and my jaw was on the ground. I kept trying to pick it up. The whole thing worked beautifully. Everybody got their due. I loved, and I'll say it because I'm probably the nerdiest Star Wars nerd you guys may know, the Star Wars reference about taking down the walker, and had that old movie. Hey, did you guys see that old movie, Empire Strikes Back? The whole crowd that the first night I saw premiere night was laughing hysterically. You would have thought this was a comedy during that whole scene. But I think Will touched on something that is very true. Like, what would happen if this person fought this person? It reminded me of when I played around with my friends, and we screwed around, and we're swinging stuff, and all of a sudden something breaks. And I equate that to the moment with War Machine. Okay, we're done, and everything got serious again, right? So that, talk about childhood moment. That was definitely a childhood moment for me. That whole scene, and I hope we get into some Black Panther here shortly because there's a lot I want to say about that.
Yeah. Before we do, we got some more comments on the Q&A side of things I've been looking at. A few comments from listener Craig Puckett. And he has a few things to say. He said his favorite bits were Witch and Vision, which I'm sure we'll get into talking about that soon. He loved that. He said it was 10 times better than Age of Ultron. He said he still loved the movie, but major issue for me was Tony is rabidly pro-reg, meaning pro-regulation.
Registration, yeah.
Registration. But he brings in Spidey in secret. Doesn't make sense, right? So... and then he also says, great depiction of Spidey, but his inclusion took me out of the movie. And I think that maybe speaks a little bit to what I was saying. Maybe his introduction was a little bit, clunk, here's Spider-Man. I know who he is because I watched a video on YouTube, and, away we go. But, yeah, thanks, Craig, for the comments and questions. Keep them coming.
Hey, Jim, can I say something real quick here?
Yeah.
To the comment and the point about how high-powered Tony is. In the comic book event that is Civil War, Tony Stark / Iron Man is a brutal asshole. He's flat. He's really. We just saw a touch of it here in this movie, which I'm glad they kind of portrayed. But he is brutal to the point where he's taking out heroes left and right and will lie and cheat and steal to get what he wants in that series. And so, I think we got without scaring kids, I think we got a pretty solid portrayal of that.
And I think they did wise in this movie by steering away from the comic book event, without going into too much detail there, was really based around like the registration of superheroes. There was this legislation where you had to register with the government and unmask and all of that. And this film steered away from that entirely and just said, only the Avengers have to be under the UN. That's what the Accords were about. Basically, just the Avengers have to be regulated. And sure, like what we end up with is that's going to be slippery slope. But I think that's the place where we have a little bit of more moral ambiguity, because I think, and that's part of the thing I mentioned before, where I could still kind of see some of Tony's side. Just having one governing body over this one particular group, I think, is a lot easier pill to swallow than every single person with powers everywhere has to be on this registration list and has to be on this list and that thing. I think that becomes a lot more scary territory based on some things that we've seen in world history in the last 100 years. So yeah, I think that they did a smart job of kind of dialing back the the registration stuff so that they could make a storyline where we could follow both sides. Chris, I want to hear your take on. Craig had mentioned before the Scarlet Witch Vision stuff. Are you a fan of that pairing?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I understand that probably those two characters, there's so much that they're going to do with them down the line. I'm sure of it. So I knew they wouldn't get much screen time, but the time that they had together was fantastic. Anyone who knows the comics knows that they have a very intense relationship in it. And kind of as a side thing right now, I do want to say, if anyone out there isn't reading the Marvel series The Vision that's going on right now, I can't recommend it enough. You don't have to have any knowledge of what went before going into it, but it is the hands down greatest comic that Marvel's putting out right now. Anyway, getting back to the to the movie, like what's so great is they are the unlikeliest of couples, but you can tell that Vision is just Squirrel Girl too. Okay, I'll give you that one. But they are just the unlikeliest of couples, and just their relationship, and especially Paul Bettany as the Vision, is just compelling to watch.
I love that character.
He was my favorite thing about Age of Ultron, and in his moments that he gets here, where like he's becoming kind of human, and they're both grappling with their powers, and trying to figure each other out and figure out themselves. And like it's kind of it rings true on this weird, unexpected emotional level that you wouldn't expect to have that kind of burgeoning love story in a superhero film like this. And it's there. It's not that big, but it's there, and it's they're going to develop it down the line, and that's just really interesting to see. And please, more of them.
And I also love that, we got some Vision character development here. It would have been really easy to just have him be like flying around, phasing through things, shooting laser beams out of his head. But there's actually some gravitas to like him sort of feeling, I don't know that it's intentional, but he comes across as a little superior sometimes, right? He's not a base human. He is mysterious. He is his consciousness. But it's his fucking distracted laser beam that puts War Machine down and paralyzes him for life, ostensibly, without the aid of technology, right? So I'm interested to see what kind of impact, right, these actions have had on the Vision. But I want to circle back to, we were talking about the airport fight. One thing one of our live listeners commented, and Mick Jones, good to hear from you. Mick says, loved Ant-Man. And love that Ant-Man did bring a lot of the comic relief. I like this call out, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it was, I don't know if you remember, but during our Ant-Man review, guys, remember how I was like, well, wait a second, because I had never read an Ant-Man comic. I'm like, well, if he can go really small and like go back to being big, why can't he go back, like, why can't he be big and then go back to being normal sized? And Will, I think you may have like referenced that it could be a thing back then.
I think I was being coy. I was trying to be coy and not spoil anything. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you were, and I appreciate it, because when it happened, when he was like, "I've only tried this in the lab a couple of times," I'm like, no, they're not going there. Are they doing it? And then he's like supersized. But yeah, I mean that was kind of amazing that they did that. I loved the whole Empire Strikes Back, like AT-AT Walker thing. Yeah. I thought that was a clever way of putting him down. But I also like that we got to see Ant-Man in jail too. Like they didn't just forget about Ant-Man at the end of that fight. Like he continued to be sort of part of what was going on. So I wanted to ask, do you guys feel like he was a welcome inclusion here overall?
I think so. I think he definitely was. He wasn't. I think everybody had something smart and funny to say. Clearly, Ant-Man and Spider-Man were the two comedians of the whole battle. But I definitely thought that he brought a lot to the table, and he stood tall with them. There's nothing funnier than watching Paul Rudd walk up and grab Chris Evans' shoulders and go, "Man, he's so big."
He was channeling Brad in that moment.
I know. I was just like, that was great. So I think if there's more in the future, that he'll fit in nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought Paul Rudd as a great comic relief. I think that, You don't necessarily need to have comic relief in a film like this, because I think there's enough going on, and you have some of the other characters provide their own humor in and of itself. So you don't need a character like this in the movie, but if you include him and you write funny jokes for him, he's just going to elevate it even further. And I think that's what worked so well about him. Paul Rudd is just one of those guys who I think you can give him just about any material and he'll knock it out of the park. He is just that funny an individual. I would love to see what the script versus what was ad-libbed looked like, because I have a feeling he probably added his own flourishes to some of those scenes. And again, that's why you cast a Paul Rudd in a role like this. Very welcome. Very welcome.
Who's the guy who plays Bucky?
Sebastian Stan.
Sebastian Stan.
Oh man, I like that guy a lot. He doesn't. His character isn't very expressive or emotive, right? So he doesn't get to show his chops off. But there was one little joke scene, and I don't like these movies to be too jokey. You guys know me about that. But there's one where he's sitting in the car, and I forget who's in the front seat. He's in the back. He says, "Could you just move?" What did he say?
Falcon. He's like, "Can you scoot up?" That was the Falcon in the front seat.
Yeah.
He tells him to scoot up. He's like, "Would you scoot up?"
Could you just scoot up a little? And he's like, no. And so he scoots. You could tell he like moves over to the other side of the seat, and you could tell where they cut that right before it that he was ready to crack up, like right at that point. If you watch the very end of that edit, you could see that there's like a smile coming across his face. And I just wonder if stuff like that might have been ad-libbed. You know what I mean? At some point, and they decided to keep it in.
Yeah, certainly very possible. So I do want to circle back. We mentioned him earlier several times, but I don't feel like we've given him his due yet. And that, of course, is Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther. So I know nothing about the Black Panther character going into this movie. I'm way more of a DC guy than a Marvel, so I'm still in my Marvel discovery phase. But so they introduce, his father, the king of the country, and of course his father is, I guess, leading the Sokovia Accords or whatever, right? And I'm like, man, why is this like king of an African country like getting all this screen time and his son like having this conversation? I'm like, what is that all about? And then all of a sudden, like Black Panther is showing up, and I'm like, this is so fucking cool. Oh, now I get it. I get it.
Daddy issues, remember? Daddy issues.
Right. It's all about the dead daddy issues. But I have to tip my hat, literally, to Marvel for using this movie to springboard a new character into his own, arm of movies, I can only assume, in a way that didn't make the movie feel overly packed or cumbersome. Like, I look at, like, Batman v Superman, and you guys have all seen that movie, right? I'm not going to spoil anybody if I... Okay.
Unfortunately, yeah, go ahead.
Spoilers for Batman v Superman, but we didn't need any goddamn YouTube videos to introduce other characters. Like, here, we actually got to have a character, like, have a moment, be a thing. We got enough of this character to be like, wow, he's super cool. I want to learn more about his story. Apparently, he has a country that has bazillions of dollars to make freezing condos or something in the jungle. I don't even know what those were.
That would be Wakanda. That's Wakanda.
All right. Well, apparently it's the bridge of the fucking Enterprise crashed in a jungle because. Yeah.
I love that you're getting to, like, I'm not gonna lie, I was almost tearing up watching you just now, Brad, because like and I'm not joking. Like the amount of like joy that you're taking in this discovery is the type of stuff that, like, I've experienced with these characters through reading about them in comic books and knowing that there's someone who's not a Marvel guy who is experiencing this same stage of discovery, like, and knowing that there are, that you're not alone in that there's all of these other people, maybe who've never read comic books before, or kids who, like, this is their gateway to, like, some of these characters that have been with me through my entire life, like. That's powerful stuff, and I think it works so well that they, as they did with Chadwick Boseman here, they do a really good job of casting the right person and introducing the characters in the right way. This is a character who you can understand why he's going to lead his own film. Like, he's going to be a headliner soon, and anyone walking out of this movie is going to be like, yeah, I'd watch that movie.
That's the movie I want to see. I mean, I've seen enough Spider-Man. Nothing against Spider-Man, Chris, really. But, I mean, we've seen so much of Spider-Man origin stories and stories Give us something new. Give us Black Panther. You know what I mean? I am really stoked to see the Black Panther movie. And who knew he lived on Isla Nublar, right? I mean, 'cause at the end there, I was expecting like pterodactyls to come swooping down, and like this is where we finally get the Marvel Jurassic Park crossover. Like
we're gonna get some deep stuff out of the Black Panther. See, you know, in the comics, he's a very wise. He's smart. You see it. He's compassionate. You got a taste of it in this movie. He has all these characteristics that make him who he is. And let's face it, how hard is it to make a black or have an African American as your lead character, especially in the superhero movie? So I've been wanting this for a long, long time. I mean, I think the last one we had was Blade, unless there was another. But this is going to be huge, and I definitely can't wait. They've done him perfectly. His country is where vibranium, the metal that everyone seems to want to use for one thing or another, comes from. It's part of could be Winter Soldier's arm. It's definitely part of the shield. This country is very pivotal, and to finally bring it in and bring it in softly. They didn't just punch you in the face with a Black Panther. You know, they gave him reason and for being there. They gave him, you know, they let him shine. They definitely let him shine, and that was, I have to say, probably Black Panther was my favorite. He's a little bit more than Spidey. Spidey was great, but Black Panther was my favorite.
And he's a little bit, you know, he keeps himself a little bit distant.
Yep.
I got the sense he keeps himself a little bit distant from the rest of the you know, Avengers crew.
Well, he protects himself and his country. You know, he keeps everything.
He's a king first. Like
Yes.
that is his thing. He is a king first. And I think you get that vibe from him here in this movie. And I think they also did a good job of, they actually first started introducing Wakanda in Age of Ultron. Like they had, like there was some stuff that was happening there with like that, you know, that special metal they had to use, and you know the guy gets his hand chopped off. All that stuff, all was the lead in to all of this stuff, but very softly, very gently. Again, like there were problems with Age of Ultron. That the last act of it was very full. But some of the stuff they did do, where they started setting up this movie, which sets up Black Panther, like they know how to leave a they know how to leave a trail of breadcrumbs quite well.
Yeah, I think just to piggyback on what Felipe and Will both said, I think what's really great about this is, like, you know, with Brad discovering these characters for the first time, you know, then I think about my nephews going to this movie and seeing it, and then I think about them being interested and picking up a Jack Kirby comic and seeing like his work on the Black Panther. And like really, I mean, if I can be idealistic here for a second, that's kind of the point of these movies, other than to make billions and billions of dollars, is to kind of go back and, you know, kind of celebrate the original works. Okay, it's not the main point, but it is a point that's in there somewhere. And I really like the idea of, you know, like people who haven't been introduced to this stuff before really going out and like learning about like the cultural riches of Wakanda as presented in the Marvel universe, you know, and in ways that aren't going to be expressed on screen just because there's not ever going to be enough time to do so. But yeah, I really, it's so exciting to me that this part of the Marvel universe has now been opened up to moviegoers.
We got another comment from Craig, and he was talking about, there's a moment in this movie that I almost forgot about, but then when I think back of it, it was one of the other true laughs that I had. He said, speaking of jacked Chris Evans, I love the cheesecake moment where he holds the helicopter back in a pose that attached to the building, right? Oh, man, did you guys laugh at that as much as I did?
No, actually, I couldn't laugh. I got to throw this out real quick. I couldn't laugh because the girls all behind me were swooning.
Oh, really?
So, no, there was no laughter.
That was kind of a crazy one.
I was too busy swooning to laugh. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad he wore that T-shirt, but I wish he wasn't wearing it.
There was no reason for that shot other than for him like, hey, I'll be in your movie. I'll do that third movie, but I got to get my pose in.
So much tail with this scene.
You know what though? In all seriousness, I do appreciate that scene, if nothing else, because he's not in his Captain America like costume. Like he's just doing his thing spontaneously, and you get to remember, hey, this guy doesn't have like a super metal suit that gives him 1,000,000 times strength. Yes, he had the serum that like gave him sort of superhuman strength to a degree, but correct me if I'm wrong, he's not as strong as like Spider-Man, right? Like he can't lift a helicopter.
Spider-Man can lift up a jetway.
No, yeah, Spider-Man can lift like tons of stuff. Like Captain America can lift like kind of a peak human, above peak human. Like he's a strong dude, but not that strong. And you're right, Brad. The reason why this is so cool is that you later in this movie, you see people like hurling shit all over the place, just like they're super strong. And it's easy to forget about what Captain America can do and just think about like, oh, he's the guy with the shield. But he's also the guy with the super serum, and this is where we got to see him showing off that, like, yeah, this dude actually has powers, too. I love that it kind of helps us kind of recalibrate him against all of these people that we're about to see later on in that hangar scene.
What did you guys think of the climactic showdown between Captain America and Iron Man in the Hydra hideout thing there? What did you guys think of it?
I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah.
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 It was interesting to see how it was going to go, because, there was that moment there they teased us that Captain America was going to, like, end, Iron Man with the shield, and obviously he didn't. I thought there was some nice moments there. There was some nice emotional beats in that whole sequence, which I thought were really good.
So I want to ask a question. And just raise of hands because I can see you on video. Who here has ever had like a really crazy like emotional fight with a friend where you both kind of walked away not friends anymore? Okay. So some of us have had that experience. So here's my thing. I have unfortunately had that experience, and there's a moment when those things happen where it's like you're arguing with your friend and you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm approaching a line. And if I say this one more thing, I know I'm going to cross this line that I can't come back from. But oh my God, I'm so pissed, and this person wronged me so much, it just like comes out of your mouth, and then you can't take it back anymore. And I felt like this movie did a great job of sort of portraying that through a lot of the dialogue, but especially the action in that final fight. Like when Captain America like fucking like slams the shield down, even on the arc reactor instead of like Tony's face or something, he could have just thrown the shield down. He didn't have to do that. I mean, the arc reactor is Tony's lifeblood. I mean, he has to have that to live, right? So to fucking damage that thing with his shields, I don't know. To me, it said a lot. Like obviously he wasn't willing to kill him, but he kind of went farther than I would think he normally would without being pushed. And for me, that was really powerful.
Yeah, he went for the heart. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right, Brad. That's actually it's the moment right after that got me kind of strung in me emotionally, and that is it's a pan back of Iron Man. Now his suit's damaged. I don't know if he's thinking, how am I getting home? What the hell? Or he's emotionally damaged completely. He's gone through the ringer, they both have, and it just holds on him for longer than I expected. And he's just kind of stumbling around there. And then you realize everything, no matter what they do from here on out, that relationship is completely different. It totally touches on what you just said. And yeah, I completely agree.
Without getting too much into Batman versus Superman spoilers, this is a film. Both of these films are about these two major characters coming to blows. Like that's why you got tickets to both of these films. Whereas the one is all about them just kind of randomly starting from a place of like distrust and then mending. This is one where through the course of this film. And over the course of the last 13 films, remember, this isn't our first time to see these characters, we've got to see this relationship build up, and we slowly saw it degrade over the course of this film. So by the time we get to that final fight, there was so much pent-up emotion from both characters. Like, even if you picked one side over the other, and certainly this is Captain America's movie, so you can more readily side with him in here, and I do too. But you can understand why Tony was upset. You can understand why Cap was at the brink. You could understand why the events that had been forced upon them led them to this really, really terrible severing. This thing that has ended this phase of the Marvel Universe. Like at this stage, we are going to move into a new, they call them release phases, which is all their films. But each phase ends with the fabric of the universe being completely different than it was before, and now our heroes have come to blows with one another, and they are not the same for it. They aren't stronger for it. Both of them have damaged and lost something kind of important in this fight. To me, that's huge stakes. That is huge stakes that we got to see play out.
Can we talk about that a little bit? Because I don't have the knowledge.
Yeah.
But isn't that thing that's in Tony's chest? I'm trying to remember the Iron Man movies. Is he totally reliant on that, or just when he's in the suit?
He's totally reliant on that thing. That's why you didn't see it just like go completely out, because it's like, you know, that's, remember, he that's basically his pacemaker as much as it's anything else, because he has a shitty heart.
But I mean,
in Iron Man 3, didn't they fix that?
I thought they fixed it.
I think you're right.
They removed it.
Yeah.
No.
So what the hell? So it wasn't as big of a deal. I don't know. Maybe it was more
It
symbolic.
was more symbolic of the breaking of his heart than anything.
Yeah.
I took.
But yeah, and you know, here's what I expect. I expect the next, you know, Tony will have a new thing, right? You can make those. He's a whiz kid. He has all these resources at his disposal. And I think, you know, I don't know if this rift continues or they just get back together the next Avengers movie and everything is cool.
Well, the next Avengers movie is coming. It's at the end of the next phase. It's a few years out. So even if the next Avengers movie is the one where we see them get back together, anything that even briefly mentions the Avengers, you know, like the next Ant-Man movie or Black Panther or whatever, you know, Spider-Man, we're going to see a landscape where the Avengers are fractured in half.
Okay.
So this rift here is not, you know, even if it does get back together, and honestly, we want to see it come back together. Like, we don't, like, as fans, we don't want this to be the end of the Avengers forever and everyone to always be sad. We want them to come back from the brink, but I think we're going to get to see it play out, even if it's in the background or kind of in a tertiary role. We're going to see it play out in some of these other movies before it gets better.
Yeah, I was wondering about that, if they just, you know, get back together and then they joke about it in the next movie and the next thing you know, everything's good. It sounds like, though, you guys, speaking from a comic sensibility, know that there is this rift and this rift does continue.
I would say not even from the comics
universe
perspective. Like, this is just from because the comics have their own, like, the comics went, by the end of the event, it went into a completely different territory.
Yeah.
But just judging on where they're at, like, this is Marvel, for what they've done really well. They do a really good job of not resetting the status quo after every film. The effects of one film bleed into the next in some way, shape, or form. So we're, you know, at the start of the next movie, I can guarantee you isn't going to start with, like, Cap and Tony having a beer saying, "Man, that last thing was kind of rough, wasn't it?" When the two come back together, it's going to be plot driven.
Yeah. They're not going to meet up at shawarma.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh.
Right.
That
But are the Accords
sad, doesn't it?
Are the Accords dead at the end of this movie?
No, the Accords were
No.
solid. Yeah.
No. Okay. Didn't know if they. I thought there was something mentioned about the Accords near the end of the movie, and you know, that they were not gonna. You know, either Tony Stark said something. I don't remember exactly how it was left. See, that's why I have to see it again.
So we do have another live comment from Craig Puckett, who has been patiently waiting for us to circle back. So, he says, "Are you sure that it was only the Avengers that are being controlled by the UN whatever council?" Because he says he's pretty sure it was all enhanced individuals that are now under the purview.
They mention enhanced individuals, but the actual rift between Tony and Cap doesn't have to do as much with the registration side of things. Every time they argue about it, it all has to do with, I want the Avengers to be able to be flexible, to go out and do what we think is best, versus you know, I don't want the Avengers to be weaponized by this country or that country. So while there's mention kind of at the political standpoint of these other things, the real rift between Tony and Cap here has to do with the weaponization of the Avengers versus the comics, where it really has to do with the registration. And that's the point I was getting at. Is like it really has to do with, like, when you really look at the crux of their conflict, it really had to do with what they wanted out of the Avengers and who they wanted to control the Avengers.
But as fans of these characters and of these movies and of the comic books, don't we all kind of want to see them continue as autonomous superheroes that are individual and stand apart from control? Isn't that what we love about them in the first place? So why would we ever side with a side that wants to be registered and regulated? And that's what I don't get. Like, that's why I went right with Captain America. I'm like, he's right. There's no way I want to see, as a fan, I want to see any of these superheroes controlled or moderated and yes, there's risks associated with that. I get it. But
you got to keep in mind, though, I think that not all were necessarily forced. Some did it willingly. War Machine's a good example. He took that upon himself, his own conscience, and he did it even at the end. When they show him there trying to learn how to rewalk again, or if he can, he says, I believe it. It's still right. It's the right thing to do. Let's face it. They did a really good job of setting up the kill numbers in this thing, and people are pissed. You have to look at it that way. People are pissed. They lost people. Loved ones are gone.
Imagine if you lived in this world. We have a much more boring universe if that's the way, though. That's what I'm saying.
Well, imagine if we did live in this universe. Like, I mean, I think it's easy for us to, from an escapism, fantasy perspective, to think, like, we want the capes to go in and knock these people out. But we look at, like, the death toll in Man of Steel. We look at, which isn't Marvel Universe, but it leads into the same conversation. Another parallel. We look at what happened in Sokovia. We looked at what happened in New York. We looked at what happened in Winter Soldier. We look at what happens all of the time. Like, even if you watch, like, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or, like, Ant-Man or, like, the stuff that isn't major, there's a lot of background collateral damage that happens that doesn't get addressed. And so that's why coming into this, I was hesitantly Team Tony, and I think for me it was going to depend on how they depicted the inciting incident. To me, I think this inciting incident, the stuff with Crossbones and, like, the explosion that killed, like, the 11 people, certainly was a big one. To give you guys, it wasn't, I think, enough to keep me on Team Tony's side, especially, again, because this is a Captain America movie, and I stayed with it. The comic books, it had, the inciting incident was a team that was chasing a villain who had explosion powers, and they chased him into a school, and he blew up, like, 200 kids. So that inciting incident at the beginning of the Civil War comic event makes you, for me at least, made it to where it's like, you know what? Yeah, maybe someone should be looking after these guys.
I like that you brought up the collateral damage thing because, hold on, guys. Hold on one second. Hey, you know what? The airport has totally been evacuated. We can go have a smack down there and blow shit up. No, it's just so funny because in these superhero movies now, and it actually started with these Marvel films, DC kind of copied it, or were they thumbing their nose up at Marvel? I don't know. When they're like, hey, the harbor has been totally evacuated. Hey, no one works in the city after 7 p.m. We can knock buildings. So in this movie they were doing that again, and I think in this day and age of superhero films, I don't want to get too deep, but in a post-9/11 world, you have people seeing buildings crashing down. You have people seeing these huge structures blowing up and going, what the fuck? How many people just died? Who's paying for that? How is the city going to rebuild from that? Those are questions that have to be addressed, and I think this movie does a good job of kind of setting that question up. It sort of sets up the central conflict of the film. Obviously, the Bucky stuff comes in later, and we learned, oh no, wait, Bucky was actually being mind-controlled. So it's all okay, right? But I don't know. I'm glad that they address it.
I know. I agree with you, Brad. Go ahead, Chris.
Sorry. Even Vision raises the point when they're picking sides about how, like, since Tony Stark first appeared, there's been all these almost like world-ending events that have kind of raised alongside of, they kind of parallel each other with these heroic individuals come these threats to the world. So, they did a nice job of kind of addressing that as well.
No, I would agree. Circling back to Man of Steel, I remember sitting, I think we all watched it together, Brad, Jim. I remember sitting there and watching them just shred Metropolis, and I was so upset just sitting there going, nobody gives a shit. Buildings are falling, and nobody gives a shit. And when we got out of the theater and we tried to walk away from people not to spoil them, that was my biggest complaint. I don't know if you remember that. I was like, what the hell? Why would hell, even in the old Superman, the Superman 2, the one where the 3 come down, he left. He left because he saw what was happening to the people. And so to watch this now, even now, post 9/11, as you say, it shocks me. There have been several movies where collateral damage necessarily isn't addressed. Star Trek Into Darkness was another one. The Enterprise came down and just shredded all of San Francisco, and we just kind of moved on from it, right? So I'm glad that somebody's doing it at least.
One question I have for you guys: I've been extremely positive on this movie because I absolutely love it. If I don't have other films that I need to watch either for the show or because they slip through the cracks, I'm going to try to get out and see this one again in theaters because I liked it that much. One thing I absolutely did not like was and I love the fact that Stan Lee makes cameos in all of these films, but I felt like this was probably the clunkiest Stan Lee cameo to date, at least for me. Are you guys? How did you guys feel?
Agreed.
I rolled my eyes at it.
Eye roller, man. It's an eye roller. And I don't know. There's probably some people who get a little thrill out of that because they see it, but
it is.
Maybe they could have done it a little better. You know what I mean? It was just really. Yeah. Again, there were a few moments that took me out of the movie. That was one of them. It's a nit. It didn't wreck the movie for me. Right. Just one of those little things.
Hey, can I bring up a plot point I want to discuss real quick? Is it possible?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to spit this one out there and see if you guys. Okay, so again, love the movie. I had one issue with this film, and maybe I understand where it led to at the very end. But was anybody else disappointed that Zemo knocked off the other Winter Soldiers and we weren't going to have a major battle?
No, not at all. I thought that was awesome. I thought that was because the movie was leading you down. Yeah, the movie was leading you down a path and setting up your expectations. Like this guy's plot is to release. He had a thing going on where he was going to release these superhumans and unleash them on the Avengers. But no, his plot was to pit them against each other. I don't want to spoil another movie that we saw earlier in this year, but
I think it's so much. I think it's so. I mean, I'll do it. I think this guy was way fucking smarter than Lex Luthor was in Batman v Superman.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think it's from an audience expectation perspective. It was good too because at this point we've already seen Cap and Tony at each other's throats, and then start to realize like, oh, okay, like. Something's going on here, and Tony's even like, I'm gonna go help Cap. Like at this point, like what we're expecting is for them to team up, be best friends again, find out that they share the same mother's first name, and fight the five guys, right? We were expecting that, and then we turned out like the subversion is we get there and it's like, no, that's not the movie we're watching. We're going to, the stuff that they had just gotten back together. We're gonna cut that in half. So I loved that. Now I would say if I'm being nitpicky. It was a little clean and convenient for Zemo in that, like, how would he know that exactly that combination of people would show up in that room at that particular time? And I would say that, like, it's one of those things where, like, when I really intellectualize it, I can probably knock the film slightly for that. But at the same time, the payoff is so good from it that I would rather them have gone the direction they did than spend another 15 minutes trying to like back into it. Instead, we're just kind of left like kind of gobsmacked, like, holy crap, what just happened? Oh my God, your mom and dad are fighting.
I was totally shocked, and you guys probably knew this from the very beginning of the movie. Kind of that scene, that prologue scene that the prologue scene that we saw, and then the scene late in the movie where they cut back to Bucky when he's under Hydra control, crashes that car and steals that serum shit. No idea what was going on there until later in the movie, and that was, to me, that was like, oh my God, I should have known that, right? Everybody else in the theater probably knew that except me, that was Tony Stark's parents driving that car. You know what I mean? And that just ratcheted up the stakes. The emotional stakes. I won't say it ratcheted up the emotional stakes like that much more for that final scene, and I thought that was well done. Felipe, you probably knew that, right?
You know what? I have to admit, it was a thought in my head, but it was a shock at the end.
Yeah.
What do you think, Chris?
I kind of suspected that's where they were going because just to tie it into the opening scene with him.
Yeah.
with Iron Man.
But did you know at the beginning of the movie when they showed that scene that car? I mean, did you know that Tony Stark's parents somehow had super serum in the back of their car? I mean,
no, the first time, no. I
Yeah.
think the second time they showed it is when I was like, yeah, that's going to be his parents.
That's when I figured it out too, and I'm like, oh my god, they're going there. It was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and you knew, like, if anyone that watched the trailer, and this was me, I'd watched the trailer, and I knew that one three-way fight where they're tossing the shield back and forth. I knew that was coming, but at that point, like, Tony had started to, like, shift gears back over to, like, Cap's side, so I was like, how the hell are they going to, like, pigeonhole another fight in here? Like, did I miss something?
Right.
So I guess the one thing the trailer did make me think is, like, there's something probably going to happen here, but I will say, as someone who's I'm usually pretty good at kind of ferreting out kind of the direction these things are going, and I will say that this one, for maybe I was too distracted by all the other things, or they masked it well, or whatever. But like when that reveal happened, I was like, oh, okay, all right, yeah, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
Good job, movie.
And then that whole scene where Tony is forced to watch the death of his parents, and the guy who killed them is standing right there. That scene was pretty heavy. That was pretty dark shit.
It was super dark. Actually, it was super dark. Think about it. Winter Soldier, 3 punches to the bridge of the nose of Howard Stark. Okay?
Right.
That's a brutal way to go. Let me tell you. That is definitely a brutal way to go. And then we saw how the mom went. And then if you want to continue it on, think about this. The dagger was the fact that Captain America knew. That sealed it for me.
When did he know? Because I didn't...
Well, he didn't know it was Bucky, though, right?
No, he must have known, because he asked him point blank. He said, "Did you know?" And he said yes.
He said, "I didn't know." He said, "I didn't know it was him." So he knew that his parents had been killed.
Yeah.
But he didn't know that it was Bucky who did it. At least from what he said.
Yeah. That was a really, really, really brutal scene, and you know, I give him credit for throwing something that dark in there. That was pretty awesome.
I would think if Captain America had known that it was Bucky, he would have like worked a little harder to like help Bucky and Iron Man get through their shit like before it came to blows. Like,
you would think.
I mean, he's a very like earnest, honest person. I don't think he would have kept that from Tony.
I think I'm down for some research now, because now I'm not quite sure. I can't quite remember.
I
think about this though. He's attached. Well, he was attached to S.H.I.E.L.D., so there were a lot of files he had access to. Who knows what he's seen? So, and look at it from that point.
Yeah, Felipe, you mentioned S.H.I.E.L.D. At least maybe from my perspective, and maybe I was missing a lot of it, there wasn't a lot of S.H.I.E.L.D. in this movie.
No. It's pretty much...
Which was
gone.
Awesome.
It's gone.
It was awesome.
But S.H.I.E.L.D. is like an underground, like it's a totally different organization.
Yeah. Right.
And that's great. Like the effects of Winter Soldier have impacted the film and the television universes so much that like this one entity, which was such a huge part of the first Avengers movie and a part of Winter Soldier, didn't get the opportunity to interfere here, because I think if S.H.I.E.L.D. was around, I think that the Sokovia Accords, that whole conversation would have been completely different. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think even with the passing, it kind of put all of that to rest.
Yeah.
Literally.
So, last live comment from listener Mick Jones. He said, "I loved the scene between Black Widow and Black Panther's assistant. Looking forward to a fight scene." What do you think, Chris? Are you riled up for a cat fight between these two?
I mean, I think it's going to be more of a thing of his assistant is just going to be incredibly badass in the Black Panther film. I don't know if they're actually going to, the two of them would come to blows, but that could just be the homosexual response too. So,
It'll be interesting to see who she ends up being. I have a hunch who she might be from the comics.
I do too.
And if she is, cool. No, I'm not gonna say who she is. If she is who I think she is, cool. If she's someone brand new, I'm also cool with that. Like I feel like we got enough just from that one quick introduction that I'm like, sign me up. I want to see what she does next.
Yeah. I can simply say without spoiling anything, while she may not be the specific character in the next movie, the people that are with him are very important, and that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. We'll leave it at that. Well, guys, believe it or not, we've been talking about this movie for like an hour and a half at this point.
I love
So it's awesome. I'm sure we could talk about it for another 2 hours easily. But I do think we should get on to some plugs. So are we down to shift gears for that? All
Let's
right.
do it.
Maybe we'll do a revisit
I just want to
episode.
give
I don't
one
know.
shout out to Daniel Bruhl. I thought he was excellent in this role. Kind of an understated villain, a cold, calculated, understated villain, but I love that guy in almost
He's a great
everything he's in.
actor.
I love
he's
him
a
in
great
everything he's
actor.
in. Yeah.
Co-signed.
Yeah.
Agreed. It is known.
It is known.
It is no.
It is known. All right, excellent. Well, let's kick some things off with some plugs. Chris, I mentioned earlier that you write for Den of Geek and Uprocks. Is there any self-promotion you want to do? Feel free, or if you want to plug a movie or something, whatever.
Sure,
whatever
yeah.
trips your trigger.
You can find me on Twitter at Bionic Bigfoot and at Sci-Fi Explosion. And also, you can pick up the books that I wrote introductions for, Archie's Favorite Comics from the Vault and Archie's Favorite High School Stories.
Excellent.
All right.
Cool.
Awesome. Good stuff. And let's go with Felipe next. Felipe.
Hey, my plug would be for our show, the Real Comics Podcast. I go by my little surname of Voodoo57 with my partner SpeedyG33. You can find us on Twitter at Real, that's REEL _podcast. And you can catch our show Wednesday nights at about 9:30. That's local time here in Arizona. I believe that's Mountain Standard at this point. And hear us talk about what we have to say on our show. I take the movie end of things, and Speedy G, a.k.a. Andrew Gonzalez, takes the comic book side of things, and he is well-versed. I wouldn't have some of the knowledge that I do have without some of his help.
That should make for an interesting conversation around this movie, if indeed the two are that much different.
They are. And so our last podcast was about the differences that we expected prior to watching the movie, because clearly the comic book event series is, I don't know how many comics, but it's basically from the standpoint of every hero you can think about in the Marvel universe. You're talking, quite a few. So they could never make a movie that way. So, now that we've seen the movie, we've got a lot to say, that's for sure.
Especially since the Fantastic Four kind of play a big role in the comics, and of course they can't use them for this movie.
Nope. So does Wolverine. So does
Right.
There are a bunch of others. Deadpool's in there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Kind of cray. All right. Thank you, Felipe. Will.
All right, two things. First thing's a baby plug for the new Radiohead album. It's called The Moon-Shaped Pool. I know it's not a film related item, but it's the new Radiohead album, and it's fucking awesome. You can find it on iTunes, Apple Music. It's really cool.
Well, you got to read Adrian's tweet on that. Did you read it earlier?
Did you see a second one?
No,
His
I
first
didn't.
one was he didn't like it, and then he followed up with one going like, actually, I'm kind of coming around on this. And that it's a great album. It's like it sits right in the pocket. And I love a good album that knows how to do that without having to embellish too much on flares. It's an album that knows what it is. But the film I want to talk about is this movie called Nasty Baby. I screened it last year for AGLIP, a festival that I work on here in Austin, and I've been wanting to talk about it with people for a while because it's a super divisive film, written directed by Sebastian Silva. It's got Tunde Adebimpe from TV on the Radio and Kristen Wiig in it, about this gay couple and their female friend who are these very pretentious hipsters trying to figure out if she's going to be their surrogate or not, and then things happen. It's finally available on Amazon Instant Video, so if it's not a film for everyone, I think some people are going to absolutely love the ending just because of the twists and turns it takes. I think there are some people who are going to be kind of left going why did they do this? But I think it's one you should absolutely check out. It's called Nasty Baby. And it's one of the films that's honestly 6 months later, I still find myself thinking about it quite a bit. That's the mark of a good movie, I think.
Awesome possum. All right, good stuff. For me this week, I want to give a shout out to Movie Bears Podcast TV. We haven't recorded yet this week. We'll be doing so tomorrow, relative to when we're recording tonight. And if you're listening 5 days ago, good luck with the math, trying to figure out when that is in relation to when you're listening. But it is the Movie Bears Podcast TV episode for the week of Monday, May 9th. We are going to be talking about the last 2 episodes of Game of Thrones. So I know some of you guys are fans. We won't spoil. Don't worry. Some people haven't seen it yet. But definitely we are looking forward to catching up with Game of Thrones, what's going on there. We're also going to be catching up with Survivor. We've been in love with this season of Survivor. Somehow 30-plus fucking seasons later of this show, it's still awesome. It's still got our interest. So definitely check out the episode this week. It'll be in iTunes and Stitcher Radio, probably around Thursday the 12th or whatever the day that is. So check it out. Jim, what do you got?
I'm just going to plug a little. I came across a trailer today of a movie that I haven't seen, but I had heard about it, and it's a documentary called Tickled. And it's I saw the trailer today, and it like blew my mind. Apparently, it's about this guy who stumbled across this video on YouTube about this activity called competitive endurance tickling. Right? Sounds super silly, but he wrote to the person or whatever who put these videos out and said he wanted to cover it, and then the sender sent him a shocking reply, like calling him out for his sexual orientation and threatening legal action if he digs any deeper. So what does he do? He does a whole expose and goes and digs it out. And so some crazy shit is behind some of these videos. I don't know anything more that's in the trailer, but guys, if you like documentaries and you like really kind of offbeat stuff and bizarre stuff, check out the trailer called for a documentary called Tickled that's going to be coming out later this summer. It looks very interesting.
Fantastic. I'm glad that you were tickled.
I was tickled by this. Nice, Brian.
Oh, goodness.
Nobody but you would have done that.
Hey, it's what I do. It's who I am.
I was thinking it, Brad.
I love you.
I knew somebody was.
I was thinking
anyway. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us, Felipe and Chris. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you for having me back.
Definitely. It's been much too long, so if there's another movie coming up you guys want to chat about, let us know. Always a pleasure. And Felipe has got his sunglasses and bobbleheads going. I'm going to focus the camera again one more time because that was awesome. Do it again.
They're up. They're the old school. They're the old school Funkos.
Nice.
Yes.
Love it. Love it.
All right.
All right, everyone. Well,
stay to the end. Stay to the very end.
Yeah.
Very end. Real quick before we say bye.
That kills me. Real quick, people leaving in the middle of the credits.
I know, and I convinced one family to stay in my showing. So.
Well, that's good. I made passive aggressive comments, but nobody listened to me. I'm like, anyway. But guys, catch our previous episodes on our website, moviebearspodcast.com, or go back into iTunes or Stitcher Radio. You can catch up with that back catalog of episodes. We'll see you all next time. Apparently, you're supposed to stay to the end. I don't know what's coming, but I'm interested to see. Goodbye, everyone. Take care. See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.